So what's at stake in these court cases is whether or not American citizens and their elected representatives will have the constitutional authority to make decisions about marriage policy. And as we see it, the Supreme Court should respect the constitutional authority of the American citizens and their elected representatives to make policy. And if we are going to have marriage policy that's based on principle rather than arbitrary, we need to answer three central questions in this debate. What is marriage? Why does marriage matter for public policy? And what are the consequences of redefining marriage? And so, just very briefly, I want to say a word or two about each one of those three questions. Marriage exists to unite a man and a woman as husband and wife, to be mother and father to any children that union produces. It's based on the anthropological fact that men and women are different and complementary, on the biological fact that it takes a man and a woman to create a child, and on the social reality that a child needs a mom and a dad. Part of this is based on that mothering and fathering are distinct and complementary phenomena. There's no such thing as parenting in the abstract. Men and women interact with their children in different and complementary ways, and the social science that we have has consistently shown that children do best when they have the love and the care of their biological mother and father, committed to each other and committed to that child in marriage. The reason marriage matters for policy, the reason that government's in the marriage business, is because it needs to help encourage men and women to commit to each other permanently and exclusively, and then to take responsibility for the children that they create. Government leaves adults free to live and to love as they choose to live and love. So there are no laws that criminalize or ban same-sex relationships. In all 50 states, two people of the same sex can live and love each other. They can have their church perform a wedding ceremony. They can have their place of employment grant them marital benefits. All of that's legal. The question is whether or not the state has an interest in redefining marriage and then coercing other institutions, private institutions, churches, civic institutions, to accept this new definition of marriage. But what the state needs in marriage is to have the man and the woman who created the child take responsibility for that child, because when this doesn't happen, children suffer and the welfare state grows. And so what we see is that during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when we had a collapse of the marriage culture, we also saw that this is when the welfare state exploded. This is when crime began to rise, prisons began to fill, poverty, especially child poverty, increased, social mobility decreased. So everything that you could care about, if you're a limited government conservative, is better served by a healthy marriage culture than by our overweening state that then tries to pick up the pieces. So then the final question, what's at stake with redefining marriage? What we argue in the report and in the book is that if you redefine marriage to make the sexual complementarity of a man and a woman an optional feature, then you're furthering distancing marriage from what it needs to do in serving the needs of children. It's hard for the law to teach that fathers are essential when you've redefined marriage to make fathers optional. It's hard for the law to teach that marriage is primarily about the needs of children when it's redefined marriage to say it's primarily about the emotions of adults. It's hard for the law to teach that men and women should commit to each other permanently and exclusively when it said that marriage is just whatever relationship the state chooses to call it. And we've already seen consequences for this in the states that have created same-sex marriage when they've forced Catholic and other Christian adoption agencies to shut down because they wanted to place children with mothers and fathers. They wanted to run their adoption agencies according to their principles, where they thought that every orphan deserves a mom and a dad. And they were told by the law that we won't give you the licensing certificate to run an adoption agency unless you treat same-sex and opposite-sex parents in the same way. And so this is already one of the first consequences, and we think that once you have the law teach something that's not true about what marriage is, there will be other consequences down the road with separating marriage from childbearing and child-rearing and focusing marriage on the desires of adults rather than the needs of children. And so it's for these reasons that we want to see the court uphold Proposition 8 in DOMA and to restore constitutional authority to the American people and their elected representatives to make marriage policy.